Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving on to our today's story. I 36M was just a simple barista whose life changed forever. I was always pretty down on my luck and not the best when it comes to anything. I didn't go to college and didn't have dreams of an amazing career. I barely got through school. My parents told me that I had to leave home, and I was pretty much on my own from then on. I didn't know what to do or what I want to do, so I did pretty much nothing. I moved out of my parents' place when I was 18, and have been living in rental apartments ever since. I had a roommate for a few years, but in the last 2 years I've been living on my own, which is my greatest achievement so far. I work as a barista in a local coffee shop, and that's pretty much the best thing I could do after flipping burgers and cleaning dishes for a few years. I didn't hate my job as I found making coffee strangely relaxing, and I like the conversation with the people. Most people come in the morning, and I always find interesting examples of different careers, and everyone sitting down to work or make business calls or send emails. I wanted to be one of those people so badly, but I knew there was no way to. About a year ago, a very sharply dressed woman started coming to the coffee shop every morning. She looked a bit older than me, the perhaps early 40s, but she seemed like a pretty important person. She was always on business calls or meetings and seemed to be a manager or director of some sort. She always seemed tired or too bothered, but she was very nice and always smiled, and we always held a good conversation. The more she came, the more we talked while I made her coffee, and the more we connected. Over time, she became my favorite customer, and we always talked a lot. She started telling me about how she was the CEO of a company, and that she always had issues with her work. She told me that she thinks nobody in the company likes her and that she always has trust issues with the managers and employees. She seemed to be pretty lonely and just wanted to have a conversation with someone. I always tried my best to be nice to her, and she seemed to appreciate it. Over time, she started trusting me more and more, and I even found her using me as a sort of therapy to tell me about cathartic experiences and to complain or the like. She thought that telling me what goes on will not make a difference since I'm so away from all of this business, but that it would make things easier on her for venting. I didn't think much of it, but she later started asking me if I went to college or if I was good at anything business related. I told her not really, but that I had a sharp mind and that I could solve problems, but that I was still just a simple barista. She seemed to want to offer me a job at the company, which I appreciated, but I didn't know if I was qualified for anything. She always kept asking me questions about what or what not I could do, and 3 months later, I found myself learning so much about management from her that I was taking down notes during my shift. She started teaching me privately about all of this stuff, and out of kindness or trust, got me a good managerial position at her company. Shifting from the coffee shop to a big company was a very big one, and I didn't know exactly how to adapt, but over time I did. She was with me every step of the way, and every time I asked her why she gave me the job, she told me that she felt I was trustworthy and a good person deep down, and that was what she was looking for, not academics, as skills can be taught. I bought into it, and she started taking me to the conferences and training and all the important get-togethers. I was still living alone in my apartment, but I had to splurge a little bit on suits and shoes. As expected, eventually we got close enough that we got married. My friends used to joke that I married a woman older, richer, and more powerful than me, but I saw no wrong in it. I thought that it was just fate, but a lot of men had that mentality that I am now inferior to her, and that she could control all aspects of my life. I didn't see it that way, but I would soon be proven wrong. I moved in with her in her massive house, of course, as we wouldn't live in my tiny apartment. Whatever stuff I had I left in my apartment, and found that the house was fully furnished and I had a lot of stuff waiting for me there. I didn't mind it, but it did seem a little bit too much. I moved in and we lived together, and everything was peaky at first. We both showed up to work every day together. I was in charge of my department, so I had total freedom there while she was in the top offices. Everyone in the company seemed to be talking, but whenever I tried to be friendly with the employees, they always seemed to shy away. I soon realized that I couldn't have this kind of friendly relationship with them, and that we had to keep it very professional. I had to be this distant boss, even though I didn't want to. I didn't feel the power and class difference between us at all, except for times when she interfered in my department to take decisions on my behalf. For example, one time I had given an excuse for a group to leave, But when she found out, she overruled my decision while I was standing next to her, and when I tried to speak, she gave me this stern look as if I was her employee. I didn't like that at all, and it made me look small in front of my team. When I confronted her about it, she joked that it was a force of habit. This wasn't the only time, though, as she continuously kept opposing me on several points, and the employees eventually went to her directly as a way to stick it up to me like a kid getting permission from dad after mom refused. It drove me crazy sometimes, and every time I brought it up to her, she just brushed it off and joked about it, which made me even angrier. I had started realizing what my friends used to joke about, who was wearing the pants in the relationship, but I didn't want to obsess over it. There were some points, though, that I didn't like, and any time I tried to discuss them with her, she would wave them off as if it was trivial. She never cooked, so anytime I asked her to cook something or that I wanted to try her cooking, she would just look at me in a very ridiculing and passive-aggressive way. One time, I commented that she was dressed inappropriately, and she told me that it was none of my business. She made a whole scene out of it, and when I told her that I was still her husband, she told me to remember that we were living in her house and that I was working in her company. It was a big fight, and my dignity almost had me leave the house and the company right there and then, but she later apologized and we went on vacation to forget all the tension. Even on vacation, though, she started taking all of the decisions about where to go, what to do, what to eat, etc. I started joking that giving my opinion would be inappropriate, but she told me that I was being ridiculous. The whole trip, I didn't get one say about any detail, which kind of drove me nuts. I was forced to do activities and go to restaurants I didn't like, just because she thought that this was the best course of action. When we got back from vacation, I confronted her about this, and she told me that it was her bad. She told me that because she's always used to taking so many decisions and being put in that leadership position, it starts to rub off on her, and that she never actually means it. I understood, but I wasn't ready for what came next. All of a sudden, my wife started becoming extremely controlling. I had a good friend of mine who used to be my roommate. Anytime I told her that I was going out with him, she would come up with some excuse that I couldn't leave and had to help her with something. I kept canceling on my friend and he got angry, but my wife seemed to be doing this intentionally. When I confronted her about this and asked her why she keeps blocking me from going out with him, she told me that she didn't trust him and that he was out for our money. I told her that this was ridiculous, but she told me that if I ever went out with him again, we would get a divorce. It was beyond extreme, and I had no idea why she would think he was so bad, so it took me a while to see him again. Another time, I was going out at 8 p.m. and she went on this rant about how I'm going out too late, and that she needs me around, and that I never help her with anything. She gaslit me into thinking that I was wrong for going out after 6 p.m., and made me apologize and feel guilty. She told me that I shouldn't go out at that time again. She had that way of being pushy while being delicate, but very strangely authoritarian at the same time. Anytime I remembered that I was the one living in her house, I felt a bit awkward and didn't want to say anything. Over time, this got way worse. She started becoming more and more demanding, and whenever we went out with the elite of her social group, she would treat me less like a husband and more like a valet or servant. She always laughed off her behavior with me and how she belittled me in front of everyone. A simple example of this would be us sitting down with a bunch of other executives or rich people, and because of me being quiet, she would tell me to go park the car or do something useful instead of sitting quietly like this. People always laughed at the way she treated me, and it made me so angry that I decided I simply didn't want to live this life anymore. Her dominating obsession became worse, even in bed. At one point, she told me that I didn't need to go to the office anymore and that they had hired someone new. She didn't even tell me that she was taking my job away, but she told me that now I had time to stay at home and take care of things until she comes back. I was relegated to a housekeeper at that point, and I wanted out. One night, I told her that I wanted a divorce and she laughed. She reminded me that I had signed a bunch of contracts and a prenup with her, and that if I tried to get a divorce, she would legally bury me. She told me that I needed to remember who I was and to stay in my place. She degraded me for being a barista that she took from the streets and made something out of. She humiliated me in front of her assistant, who was on a Zoom meeting with her, and told me that it was her fault she took pity on someone like me. The next day, she went to work and I snuck out of the house. I felt imprisoned in it, so I went back to my old apartment and called my friends over to help me think about what I should do. I told them that she had lost her mind and that she was treating me more like a house pet. My friend, the one she didn't like, came clean and told me that the reason she didn't like him so much is that he used to work for her and she fired him. He told me that he didn't want to tell me the whole time so as not to make things awkward, but he told me that she has a ton of dirty business and that 99% of her employees don't like her. I thought about digging up her dirty laundry, so I went straight to the source, the employees. I secretly emailed and sat down with so many of the company's staff, and they told me the most ridiculous things. They told me how she abused them, cut their paychecks for no reason, gave them completely unfair work conditions, and constantly punished them over the smallest things. The employees gave me a long list of completely unethical things she had done to employees, like keeping them in the office overtime and preventing them from going to a parent's funeral, neglecting medical insurance, covering up a ton of workplace accidents that led to major damages, and paying off officials so no lawsuits went through, and so much worse. One employee told me that one of the accountants got so stressed from covering up dirty money to the point that he committed suicide. The company had such a long list of covering up accidents and reports and paying bribes. In my investigation with a bunch of the employees, one of the supervisors contacted me and told me that he needed to talk to me privately. He told me that he had been married to my wife once and that she destroyed his life. He told me how she became so obsessive and controlling to the point where she threatened to have him imprisoned if he didn't do exactly what she told him to do, and she only kept him around in the company out of spite because he hated the job, and she had him in a tight contract. Once I finished with the employees, next on my list were the house staff and maids. I stayed at her house in the morning for a couple of days to gather the evidence. I talked to the maids and the chef, and they told me some more heinous stories. The maids told me that she treats them horribly and that she once threatened one of them that she would have her deported. She was Mexican. There used to be one maid who made her angry once and kept arguing with her loudly in front of her father, my father-in-law, and then they never heard from that maid again and nobody knows what happened to her. They also told me stories about their family members dying and her refusing to let them go see them or go to hospitals or funerals or anything. She seemed to have a legal hold on everyone, and the contracts she has people sign are riddled with loopholes. I can't even imagine what she could do to me with the work contract and prenups I didn't read. I knew the one person who could stop her, her dad. The thing about her dad is that he lived abroad, but she is terrified of him. He was the one who founded the company and entrusted her with it, but he didn't trust her. Pretty much everything she has is his, including the house, and he is the extremely strict kind who is even more controlling than her. He never lets go of a mistake, and she complained about him a million times, so he was my one tool left. I got in contact with him and told him that his daughter had been messing up at the company and home and that there are major crises at hand. It took him a few days to get back to me, but when he emailed me back, I told him some more details about what I knew and he did not reply. A couple of days later, I found him at our doorstep. As soon as my wife saw him, she shivered in her boots. He got in, didn't say hi, and stood in front of both of us, telling me to start telling him what I knew. She was confused and didn't know what was going on, but I started going off on everything she had done to me, the company, and the house staff. As I was going, I could see her soul escaping her body out of fear, and he just stared at her silently and intimidatingly. Once I finished presenting my evidence, there was a moment of silence before he thanked me, apologized to the house staff, and went to town. He yelled so loudly and violently at her that she broke down in tears. He said the most hurtful things about her being a disappointment and that he had always wanted a boy. He told her that he only left her all of this so that she would shut up and he could stay away from her. He told her how much he despised her and how she only brought him headaches and troubles. In the end, he cut her off from everything. He told her that she was no longer the CEO of the company, and that he was cutting her off from the trust fund and most of the family money. She fell to her knees on the floor and begged both him and me, but we wouldn't be convinced. I told her how she gaslit me, made me feel lonely and afraid of legal consequences from my wife, and that I didn't want her to even do any of this. I told her I was happy being a barista and I wish I had never made her that cup of coffee. Now, here is the end of our today's story, and I hope you guys are enjoying my content. So before moving to the final story, you can share your thought about OP's manipulative and arrogant wife, and if you had an encounter with such spouses in your life, you can share it in the comments section. Also, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more revenge stories.